Ladies and gentlemen, Minnesota is now ground zero for the biggest COVID-era fraud scandal in the entire country. And the governor, Tim Walz, he wants you to believe that he never saw any of it coming. But there's just one problem with that excuse. People inside of his own administration warned him about this. Inspectors raised the alarm. Get this, whistleblowers begged the state to step in. But instead of shutting it down, his agencies decided to turn a blind eye and look the other way, while hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars evaporated into thin air. And when Tim Walz was finally confronted about this issue live on air, he went straight to the Democrat Party factory reset button. Just blame Trump. But when over 400 Minnesota Department of Human Services employees speak out about the radical left governor ignoring the widespread fraud in the Somali community, you're gonna have to come up with a better excuse than that. Now let's make one thing clear. They're saying this isn't some he just allowed this to happen under his watch type of situation. No, they're saying that whistleblowers felt like they were being silenced, ignored, pressured to just let it go. Multiple state employees, including an inspector, warned Walz's agencies about fake addresses, bogus invoices, and suspicious nonprofits that just launched overnight. Mill sites claiming to feed 5,000 kids out of a strip mall. Listen, the fraud was so blatant, Stevie Wonder could see it.
A massive fraud scheme uncovered in Minnesota found money intended for social services has been allegedly siphoned indirectly into the pockets of the Somali terrorist group Al-Shabaab. Somali immigrants in Minnesota have reportedly been abusing systems meant to help the most unfortunate among us, including the latest federally funded autism services. The autism fraud scheme reportedly amassed $14 million through Medicare claims for services that were never provided, involving kids who never had autism. And the Somali immigrants behind this web of schemes have allegedly stolen billions from taxpayers, much of the money going back to the Somali government, where it would then end up in the hands of terrorists. Manhattan Institute investigative reporter Ryan Thorpe was one of the first exposing the schemes for their ties to terrorism. With us now, Ryan, a line from your story stuck out. The largest funder of Al-Shabaab is the Minnesota taxpayer, and you cite an unnamed source for that. What is the evidence that all of this money that was taken and the billions upon billions of increased funding in Minnesota for social services ended up in Somalia?
Well, billions of dollars of government welfare money is missing in the state of Minnesota.
How do we define missing?
Well, the fraud is so bad that the U.S. Attorney's Office has come out and indicated that they believe their entire government programs, where the fraudulent claims outstrip the legitimate ones. There are cases where indictments have come down or guilty pleas are already in to the tunes of hundreds of millions of dollars that were fraudulently obtained, filing false claims alongside doctored paperwork. And the indictments are continuing to come. And the U.S. Attorney's Office has made very clear that this is a network of fraud schemes stacked upon fraud schemes, and that while the true dollar figure in terms of stolen funds at this point isn't quite clear, it's safe to say that we're talking about billions of dollars.
Okay. It's pretty wild, some of the things that you lay out, including one group called Feeding the Future that went from getting $3.4 million in 2019 to $200 million 2 years later. They grew faster than NVIDIA. How did nobody see that? Or is it that people and the government and those who are supposed to be the watchdogs, like Tim Walz, like Keith Ellison, the Attorney General, there just weren't looking?
I think it's safe to say that there was a real unwillingness or inability among Democratic state officials in Minnesota to recognize some pretty obvious alarm bells here. All across these programs, claims were skyrocketing, absolutely spiraling out of control over a short period of time. And the reality is that the Somali community, which is where these large-scale fraud rings have been concentrated within this population in the state, it is a sizable voting bloc. it is a voting bloc you have to win if you're going to win political office in Minneapolis. And so I think that was likely a incentive here that made some people not want to look too closely at what's been going on.
And so, yeah, there you guys have that. Incentivized to look the other way. That's what they say. I say that it was more so they were choosing to look the other way because they realized that the Somali vote, they need it. And so they pandered to that community, even if it meant turning a blind eye to blatant fraud, because the scale of this fraud is insane. Most people still don't understand how something on this level even happens. So here goes the simple version. During COVID, the federal government expanded emergency meal programs. The USDA sent the money. Minnesota's Department of Education under Waltz was supposed to oversee it, supposed to monitor, and supposed to check the numbers. And instead, what happened was a feeding frenzy. Fake nonprofits just started popping up overnight. Organizations with no history, no staff, no infrastructure suddenly began claiming they were feeding thousands of children a day. And so here's how simple the scam was. You register a nonprofit, you claim you're feeding 5,000 kids per day, you submit the paperwork, Minnesota, no questions, rubber stamps it, approves it, and before you know it, that check hits your account. Federal money just given away, and nobody even checks if the food exists, if the kids they're feeding exists. It's just a free-for-all. And so understand that that's how corrupt this system, the system that Tim Walz and his administration oversaw, that's how deep it ran. This is how deep the corruption ran. Understand, the 77th person that was recently charged with fraud in the Feeding Our Future case, they were already banned from the SNAP program for suspected fraud. Prior, let me repeat that, somebody who was already banned for food stamp fraud was still able to enroll in the federal children nutrition program under Feeding Our Future, and then they were able to claim over 300,000 fake meals and get reimbursed for over $1 million of taxpayer money. And what did the scammers do with all the money? The same thing every fraud ring does. Luxury cars, new houses, cash transfers overseas, crypto, designer bags, vacations, commercial properties, and money laundered right out the country. And nearly 80 people have been charged or indicted, and prosecutors are saying this wasn't a small ring. This was a full-blown network of cooperating groups, sharing information, coordinating the fraud, and using the state's willingness to turn a blind eye as a rubber stamp to say, hey, we got us a blank check and we're going to milk it for as long as possible. And that's exactly why when Ilhan Omar, the congresswoman from Minnesota, she tried to minimize this as a lawless individual, just a few bad actors, it's laughable. This was an entire ecosystem built on a willingness to look the other way by the government, political fear, and an administration that did not want to upset a voting bloc in fear of the backlash that they may have to deal with. And the crazy part is, it probably would have continued on. The system only collapsed once the federal agents finally stepped in. And so I want you guys to listen to this. This is Tim Walz. He gets confronted by NBC host Kristen Welker, and she presses him directly on the scandal that's happening in his state, the scandal that he's overseeing. And just listen to the excuse he pulls out of, I guess, thin air. Take a listen. Have you ever had a moment that changed your life? One accident, one employer who doesn't care, one hospital bill you couldn't pay. That's how quick life can change. And when it does, you realize something fast. The big companies, the insurance giants, they don't care about you. They've got teams of lawyers whose only job is to protect their bottom line. But who's protecting you? There's a reason why it feels like traffic always jams when you're running late. Just like there's a reason Morgan & Morgan is America's largest injury law firm. For over 35 years, Morgan & Morgan has fought for the people, not the powerful. With 1,000 plus attorneys and more than 100 offices nationwide, they've recovered over $25 billion for more than 500,000 clients just like you. Whether you're a 41-year-old family man in Florida, struck by a driver who ran a red light, Morgan & Morgan secured a $9.3 million verdict. Or a father and Little League coach who suffered lasting injuries in a car crash, Morgan & Morgan secured a $6.1 million verdict. When you hire them, it's like hiring a legal army that has your back. Starting a claim is simple. You can get started right now from your phone. No hassle. You can click the link in the description or scan the QR code on the screen to see if you have a claim. Their fee is free unless they win. Because when life changes in an instant, you deserve a law firm that's ready to fight for you.
Well, speaking of the Somali community, President Trump is targeting them and your state in part. He's citing fraud as the reason for his crackdown. Dozens of people of East African descent have been charged, convicted, and sentenced for stealing more than $1 billion in taxpayer money from government programs during COVID. As you know, Governor, that is more than Minnesota spends each year to run its Department of Corrections. So I want to give you a chance to respond to this. Do you take responsibility for failing to stop this fraud in your state?
Well, certainly I take responsibility for putting people in jail. Governors don't get to just talk theoretically. We have to solve problems. And I will note, it's not just Somalis. Minnesota is a generous state. Minnesota is a prosperous state, a well-run state. We're AAA bond rated, but that attracts criminals. Those people are going to jail. We're doing everything we can. But to demonize an entire community on the actions of a few, it's lazy. And as you heard Senator Kelly say, this president has cut a lot of inspector generals. He's cut programs that could help us tackle this on. So we'll take it on. We'll put folks in jail. I don't care what your nationality is. I don't care what your religion is, your color. If you're committing crimes, these are programs that were meant to serve students with autism, to housing, and to making sure people had enough to eat.
Wow. Just wow. His words are, I take full responsibility for putting people in jail. But besides that, Trump, Trumpity, Trump, Trumpity, Trump. Blame him. It's his fault. Talk about wanting all the credit, but none of the accountability. You cannot make this up. And so now if you thought that was bad, guys, and this is really just more laughable than anything, this is really laughable. Listen to this. Now that the Epstein files are kind of old news because they can't attach Trump to anything, no Republicans are really being put out on Front Street as far as really being attached to Jeffrey Epstein. It's been Democrats who have been the ones who have been getting exposed. So the liberal media has kind of put that news on the back burner. Now I want you to listen to what Democrats are trying to get the president to expose and release now that didn't work. This is the route they're going. Take a listen.
Well, Governor, let me have you weigh in on this, because part of your initial response to President Trump's post was to call for him to release the results of his MRI. And I want to give you a chance to give our viewers exactly a sense of what you mean. What exactly were you suggesting by that, Governor?
Democrats like Tim Walz, now they're going towards release your MRI records, Mr. President. You cannot make any of this up. And so, you have the media. They're going to try and spin this whole thing and create a narrative. But I want you guys to listen to Caroline Levitt, guys. Listen to this. She drops the hammer on the open border scam after a reporter said this. Just take a listen.
You said, and I quote, "Leaders also have a duty to preserve the integrity and character of our nation's national identity." Can you explain what you mean by our nation's national identity and integrity and character, and how would refugees, people coming from war-torn places who are seeking a safe haven in America, like many of our forebears in this room, not add to our nation's integrity and character of our national identity?
I'll tell you what does not add to our nation's character and integrity is refugees who come here under the alleged plight of asylum and fleeing persecution, and then come to the United States to abuse our system and rip off American taxpayers. And as I pointed out, the New York Times, to their credit, it was about 6 months too late, but they did write about how Somali immigrants in Minnesota have been ripping off American taxpayers. In fact, 86 people have been charged in a rampant and widespread fraud scheme spanning multiple programs in Minnesota. Of those 86, 78 of those people are Somali, 91% of them charged. So far, 59 of those people have been convicted for their roles in fraud plots that have stolen $1 billion from taxpayers. In one scheme, and this is egregious, a nonprofit and its affiliates with these Somali migrants claimed to have fed tens of thousands of American children during the pandemic. They were reimbursed for those meals by taxpayers. However, federal prosecutors found that almost all of those meals were never even delivered to hungry children. In fact, those organizations' leaders spent the money on houses, luxury cars, and real estate in Turkey and Kenya. Another scheme involved hundreds of organizations who were reimbursed for services that were supposed to help people at risk of homelessness. Once again, those services were never provided. All of this has happened under Democrat leadership in a Democrat-run state where these refugees, these migrants are coming to the United States. They are abusing our system. They are draining our resources that should be going to law-abiding, taxpayer-funded, tax-paying Americans. And this president is not going to put up with it anymore. Rachel.
I'm just glad she cleared that up because there is a big difference in my opinion. This is my personal opinion. I think that there's a big difference between those who came in the past or they were already settled here and they wanted to build something. They love this country and they love what the country had to offer. And they wanted to build something long lasting here and make themselves better. And as a result, make this country better. Versus those who come here and they're looking to leech off of the system, extract as much of the resources as possible. And that's why they really love this country. Not because they care about the land, not because they care about the people, not because they are patriotic, but simply because it's really easy, well, at least in Minnesota, to be able to extract as many taxpayer dollars as you want and then funnel it back to the place you actually care about. But now let me hear back from you. Drop your comments down below. I appreciate when you guys chime in. As always, the best way you can show your support and that you enjoy the content is by smashing that thumbs up. That tells me you like the video, and subscribe for more breakdowns like this. And as always, until next time.